and about NDC. And in actual fact, you might as well go PNDC, NDC. For me, that process, and I think we're coming up to celebrate 30 years now, it's all part of a process that is growing. I don't have the pessimism of Kofi insofar as what I have seen, insofar as freedom of media, freedom of expression, the growth of that for me has been phenomenal insofar as PNDC, NDC is concerned. So if you want to put me in that political box, I'm quite happy to say that yes, the NDC were the catalysts to bringing us to this point that we are today. And yes, Kofi is right that the agendas might have been set by others, but it is still a process which is better than what we had before.
No, I like politics, and I don't want you to be only in the political box. But what I'm saying is that on AfricaNext, we are happy to wear our politics on our sleeves. So don't feel constrained. This is not an academic exercise. We are not academics. We just broker knowledge. Feel free to wear your political hat, whether it's mainstream NDC or some margins on the NDC. And in fact, anybody here who has political hats to wear, we have businessmen, we have international civil servants. If you want to be political, go ahead. But I mean, what I was trying to say, let me formalize the debate a bit. Before, we were having a discussion on the executive. That was one of the 25 top questions which were sent out for SMS discussion. The constitutional situation now is that the president must appoint a majority of his ministers from parliament. Now, as I understand it, the recommendation of the commission, as has been conveyed in the 15-page summary statement by the chairman, is that perhaps we should not be thinking about such firm prescriptions. Before 1979, actually, in the Second Republic, all ministers came from within Parliament. We had a typical British system. All ministers came from within Parliament. In 1979, the Raymond, the Third Republic, all ministers were from outside Parliament. Now we have a hybrid kind of French kind of system where we say that the majority of ministers must come from within Parliament. Now, Julius, we might lose you with our famous internet connection. I'm going to give you the first bite. What is your position on this? Do you have particular concerns about this?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'll give you an anecdotal fact. I remember, I think it was 2002 when we were headed for the elections and we were looking for individuals to run for the NDC and for MPP for that matter. And if I was to tell you that in some cases it was a case of who can speak English in that area, that's how some people were chosen. Some people went into parliament and didn't say one single word. What I'm trying to say is the pool of resource that we have in Ghana now, there are individuals who should be working for the betterment of Ghana but never get the chance because of this closed shop which we have insofar as our politics is concerned. You and I know there are certain individuals who have been in politics longer than they should have been or should have no right to be sitting in that house. But due to the fact that the way our politics is run in Ghana, we don't have a spring of young people coming through as fast as we
Julius, so, let me interrupt. Shoot me if I'm getting too political, if I'm getting too personal. Your father was a minister in the NDC government.
Yeah.
He lost his
for 1 day.
Pardon? For 1 day?
For 1 day.
Are you serious?
For 1 day. I'm serious.
Your father was not a minister of works for longer? And Julius's father is the unfortunately late squadron leader Sowu, Clend Sowu.
Oh, okay.
So, but your father you say your father was a minister in the NDC government for only 1 day?
No. He was a minister of works and housing for a while, and he was, I'll be crude here, he was removed because they say that's so, we know the moving ass make people chop. That's exactly. And then he was made minister
of housing
for 1 day.
He was made what?
Minister of Volta region for 1 day.
Oh, really?
Wow. Absolutely.
But he was my MP for. I
He
think
was an MP, but not a minister.
he was my MP for 2 terms.
Yeah. But we're talking about the ministerial role, not the MP.
Okay, so I get my premise wrong. But he was a minister in the PNDC for much longer.
Yes, for much longer. But then it was a bit looser in those days, wasn't it?
He was a what?
There was no elections.
Yeah, it was more loose. Yeah.
Oh no! So when he no, he didn't really. He was still the NDC candidate. Was this in 2000?
In 2000 he was NDC. 2000, I think.
And then there was an independent candidate.
I recorded
2008.
No, not 2008. 2004. I didn't want to mention names, but go on.
That's when he lost his seat to another individual from the party. But I think we're digressing.
We are digressing. I thought that it might have had something to do that he was busy being a minister. But at the time that he lost his seat, he was not a minister. He was only an MP.
He was only an MP. But if you're going to talk about him, him and I had these discussions, and he's the one who told me about the caliber of person who was in Parliament.
Yeah.
And he always said that it was a shame that we could not draw upon individuals who were not politically inclined or members of parties, who were out there back in Ghana after doing whatever they did outside. And for instance, without mentioning names, you know that I have a couple of friends now who are now in positions, commissioners of this, commissioners of that, whatever. Now, if you think about it, this caliber of person is needed in Ghana now at this time. And if the constitution had not been amended to allow for the president or those in authority to bring these people in, how else would we get them to work for the country?
Julius, pause for a minute. Let me bring in our businessman representative and also a barracks boy like you, Charles Hamidou. Charles, I saw you solidly agreeing with Julius.
Yeah, look, perhaps I'm being a little too coy, but I think the argument needs to be centered properly. I think Julius mentioned the need to have the focus put more on productive abilities of certain individuals outside of the political environment. And if you look at our civil service, you've got to admit that a minister by himself is irrelevant within this larger scheme of things. He needs to have the right team around him within the bureaucracy to execute whatever project or agenda he's coming to the table with. We get caught up in these, dialectics about, whether he's an MP and whether it's. I think in having a hybrid system, it's a mixed bag. It can hurt, it can help. It depends on the individual minister, right? But that's not where I think the emphasis needs to be. The emphasis needs to be, what does this individual minister have in terms of a good support network that will get the agenda of that particular ministry moving forward. And to be honest, as a business person, we get very frustrated. I work in construction, and you go to Ministry of Works and Housing and Water, and you want to get certain things done. The minister says, this is our vision for water. But the problem is, even with the funds in place, how to get the funds from the bank into the project is always a problem. So, I'm dealing, from my perspective, we need to deal with these logistical issues. And the way I see it, it's the people who are working within the ministries, the bureaucrats, that's where...
So if I understand you correctly, you are almost adopting a headhunter kind of orientation. let's go and get the best human resource wherever they are.
Look, Ghanaians are all over the world.
What about democratic accountability?
Forget about all of that. Because look, at the end of the day, it boils down to, and we all know this, let's not be coy about it. We know this, it's true. It's about money, it's about influence, right? The people in the rural area that you were talking about, look, they're talking about bread and butter issues. Okay, they're not interested in how many, pet projects that a particular minister is interested in. They want to deal with those key things: water, power, health, education, right? And infrastructure, the road that comes into their village, the road that allows them to get their produce to market. Those are the practical things that we need to be looking at. I think we spend so much time, so much resource on issues, debating and talking about issues that we don't resonate with the people on the ground. For us in the business community, it's very frustrating because the money is there, the minister pays lip service to what we want, but the bottlenecks within the system doesn't allow things to happen. And we need to move this debate beyond these political polemics and deal with the real issues. I think that's...
I'm going to come to Kofi. I saw you nodding in vigorous agreement. Which surprises me a bit. From your management perspective, shouldn't the ministers be able to manage their time both as MPs and ministers?
No, I mean, Charles provoked a line of thought in my head, which is that there's an aspect of the Constitution that is a national development document as well, right? So, to the extent that the reality of this country revolves around some of the issues that Charles was bringing up, have we seen that reflected in this constitutional arrangement? Now, I don't think that the Constitution itself can specify any of these things that he's talking about. But I think what he's talking about is a mindset, right? And is that mindset reflected in a mechanism that goes from high constitutional principles to what's actually deliverable? Having said that, I'm not so sure I disagree. I agree with everything that he said. Now, I do agree about influence and money. And I sort of look at how that this review would have been well served. I'm taking a look at how, in the current dispensation, the rush, even the internecine warfare within parties for people to become MPs. What's driving that? Mm-hmm. Even at the cost, recently, of people having to come up with 25, 40,000 CDs as nomination fees. What is driving that process? Why are so many people? And in fact, it's going away from this idea Julius had of the most talented everywhere being available to be present in service. We are deepening sort of the monocracy in our politics in the current dispensation. Partly because of this increasing your chance of being in cabinet by being an MP is really driving this process. It's really driving the influence of money in our politics. Now, we all know there is unaccountable money in our system. Unaccountable money is the most vigorous weakener of democracy there is. We don't know who is funding these things. I mean, I'm really hard pressed to see that there's a broad middle class band of people in Ghana who have that kind of money at their disposal.
Let me stop you there. I mean, one point that many of you would not know is that Kofi has actually run a presidential campaign before.
Yes, that's true.
Kofi ran a presidential campaign of Papa Usankuma.
That is true.
So, what you said about monocracy and so on and so forth, how does that relate to your experience?
Well, you can say that this is probably the strongest causal relationship between success and failure in politics in Ghana. That those guys with the lead in the money process win. Our campaign was touted as having the best ideas and one of the best sort of spokesmen for those ideas. I mean, I remember being on a talk show, a radio talk show with my candidate.
Yeah, sounding like Indom to me.
When the late squadron commander Sowu called in. And
oh, really? Julius' father?
Julius' father called in and commended Papa. I said, Papa, do you really mean these things you're saying? Because he felt as if Papa was actually building a bridge across some divides that we have in our system. And the response was incredibly enthusiastic around some of the issues that we were raising in that campaign. However, I think everybody who knows Papa knows what his stance is on not mixing the public with the personal in terms of, and so on and so forth. But I think what impressed me about the campaign was that based on the power of ideas alone and a very attractive spokesman for those ideas, we moved this candidacy from 17th in the tracking polls at one point to being 6th at the but by the time we got to the Congress, minds had made up already. Those who had been able to, it was Alan and it was, I hate to personalize it, but Nana, and we know what went on in that process. And what
I brought this in. Let me shift you back. Let me shift you back. Wait.
Yes.
So go back to your management issue.
So, yes.
Wait. I pose the questions. Let me go back to the management issues. I mean, the issue about having ministers both in parliament, or ministers in parliament, is that from a human resource point of view, it's not efficient. But in Britain, you have ministers who are full-time parliamentarians.
Okay. Now, I mean, one would argue that, the ministerial job is composed of two things, right? There's an implementation aspect to it, and there's a policy formulation aspect. Okay? So policy formulation, what's the president's vision? How do we formulate policy that supports that? And implementation is this stuff has been passed, how do we get it through? That's something about what Charles was discussing. So there are two aspects to that. You can argue that the permanent civil service in Britain drives some of these issues in a way that isn't possible here because we don't have that institutional strength. I think that's a pretty valid argument. When you come to Ghana, there's some very, very, very practical problems with this process, right? Largely because most ministers, and sadly, I remember one minister in this current government, now an ex-minister, saying that prior to being selected, he or she had not met the president to have a discussion about the strategic issues were on the table. So we've got that as an issue.
They are appointed on the radio and they are sagged on the radio.
Exactly. So this sort of efficient distribution of talent isn't happening for that reason because there's no synchronicity between the person's abilities and what the president wishes to have done. So you have about a year built in where people are finding their feet in the context of a very weak institutional system for this, both on the policy formulation side and on the implementation side as well. So again, going back to a constitutional review commission on this topic, and I'm pleading ignorance because I don't think the process was. I think a forum like this, should have been done 1,000 times over. I'm not a big fan of a big public place where we know how that works in Ghana. We've all had experience with it. You can see those places with 2 or 3 dogmatic people who can spend, they have a 4-hour meeting, they can spend 3.5 hours talking about their parochial issues. Right? So I think some of this was misconceived in its plan. Right? And now I also think that, again, what are the issues? Are the issues compatible with the situation on the ground today? So again, France works pretty well with a hybrid system, right? But it's the holistic view of it that the Constitution must address.
Thank you.
Yes, I was going to add to what our brother Julius
Sowu, Kwame O.
Okay, which had to do with the caliber of people that we are able to. I don't want to call it attract. We are able to. We are able to get in Parliament. I'm sure in even all the countries we are copying, or we are learning from. They have people who are well-rounded, well-grounded, well-educated, they know enough of the issues. But when you have a situation where those who manage to go to Parliament, in fact, a lot of people who should be going to Parliament are not going in there because of the nature of our politics also. And so you don't have a good, well-rounded, well-grounded group of people to choose from. So it's difficult to get the best of the calibers of people you need to be ministers. Second is what my brother said.
Charles Hamidou.
Yes, about the support system. So if we had a minister who was not terribly good, not very well educated, well rounded, but had a good civil service, a good chief director, a good immediate group of people supporting him, we should be able to go very far. But even that it is worse. It is worse, and I talk fondly about when we talk about political elite and we talk about bureaucratic elite, right? And sometimes we compare, if you take corruption for example, we talk about, I group in political corruption and bureaucratic corruption, and very often the bureaucratic corruption is worse than the political corruption. And it's exactly because of some of these issues, and you have the support system not working well. So because of that,